everybody, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club. And I'm your host, Olivia Fierro, here with the show dedicated to confusing you as to what you are going to read next and make you just buy books and then you stare at them in the nightstand and eventually find the time to manage your life and all of your reading list. So stay tuned for the end of the episode. After our interview, we've got a moment with Margaret. She is back. She's got some recommendations of books new in paperback you may want to pick up for the summer from authors who have joined us previously on the podcast, so that's always fun. But now my guest, very excited about this, known as one of the greatest crime writers of our time, if not all time. It depends on who you ask, right? His new novel is the first of a trilogy, with part one released April 26th. Don Winslow is here to talk City on Fire and more. Thank you so much for your time as you're juggling a lot of these Zoom interviews before hitting the road for a multi-city tour, which you had already teased to your fans was going to be your last in real life, in-person book tour.
Yep. Listen, it's been a while since we've been able to do this, right? Because of everything we all know. And so I'm excited about getting out there. I'm excited about seeing people again. I'm excited about saying thank you, to the fans and to the readers. Every material thing I have in this life, I owe to readers and booksellers. So it's going to be great to get out there and say thank you.
And one of the stops will be right here, very near our studios. It'll be Scottsdale, Arizona for the Poison Pen. And the announcement, though, comes with that little caveat of, hey, this is come now while supplies last, because Don Winslow is not going to be popping by your local bookstore in years in the future, even though we know more books of this series is coming. So is there something that you are ready to talk about? Are you making a life redirect?
I think I'm going to let people stay tuned for that and find out. But look, this is the first of a trilogy, so there'll be two more books out. One again, the following April and the following April, and never say never.
Never say never. Okay, so let's talk about the book. And I mean, boy, it's so ambitious and incredible. I mean, those of us who love reading, I mean, we have such a great admiration for you sitting down and ever being able to start a book. The daunting process of all of that. So to imagine laying out the three and having in mind where you're going, I assume when you're beginning with our characters, set the scene for our listeners here for City on Fire, which, as I understand, is the first time that you've set a book in your original hometown.
Yeah, it's the first time I've gone home to New England, to my little state of Rhode Island and my little fishing village that I grew up in. If you saw the film Coda, it reminded me very, very much of where I grew up. And yeah, I finally went home. This is the first book in a story about a guy named Danny Ryan, who's loosely at the beginning connected with the Irish criminal syndicate in New England. And he just kind of wants to be a normal guy. He wants to be married and raise his kid, but he's drawn into this war by loyalty to his family and friends, and it escalates from there.
There are such classic themes in this, and of course, it's kind of what we all gravitate towards when we think about these moms or these families that have these reputations, and everything is about reputation and ego and ultimately respect. And it's incredible how a relatively small event can spiral or create, a trickle-down impact for generations of people. And really, there's a wild night out at a partying on the beach, and one guy, lays his hand inappropriately on another guy's beautiful woman, and everything kind of spins out from there. And it is very believable that in these worlds, something like that can trigger so much violence and so much change.
Yeah, thank you. It is that respect issue and a sort of a twisted view, I think, of masculinity, and possession and all that kind of thing. But it's based on a real incident. It really happened. There was a very similar incident that happened years ago that spiraled out of control into a war that took any number of lives and went on for 10 years.
There's always, obviously, an appetite for reading great storytelling, which you can clearly do, and you're able to weave so many characters and so much into a book. But nowadays when we're reading books often, it's funny, it was a good shift for me to go into a book like this, because I'm regularly women reading stories written from a women's perspective, or if there's people who are racist or homophobic, I'm reading it from the perspective of the person who's having to live with that and endure that and overcome it. This type of story, I mean, you're putting us into a very precise time period and group of people. And the way they talk is the way they talk, and the way that they treat people and move is. So do you have to kind of grapple with kind of making that tone believable, and understanding that today, the climate for the modern reader is they're reading a lot more maybe sensitive material?
Yeah, very much, but I write realistic crime fiction, and I'm going to treat those issues realistically. It's not the way that I talk, it's not the way I would talk, but it's the way that they talked. And if you're going to deal with those issues, there's no point in dealing with them unrealistically.
Women, of course, bring down many a high-profile man over the course of fact and fiction, and play an integral role in how things get going here in City on Fire, and also very interesting with Danny's mother and some other complex characters. As I understand, you have been married for decades, and so you got to give yourself that shift in mindset as you're crafting these kind of these men who are just that toxic masculinity, you could say.
Yeah, listen, I've been married, it'll be 37 years in a couple of
Wow,
weeks.
that's
Yeah,
amazing.
wow. Easy for me. I'm not so sure about her, But yeah, writing, for instance, Danny's mother, in this book, the stories are drawn largely from Homer's Iliad.
Mhm.
And so you're dealing literally with a goddess the goddess Aphrodite, that I had to then make a fully modern person, who has her origins, though, decades ago, and comes up, to become this very modern, very powerful woman. And so that was an interesting challenge. As a man, you always are a little edgy, a little nervous. Should I write women characters? Do I have that right? Do I have that knowledge? I think I kind of do, having been married to a very strong, independent woman for 37 years. Uh, but I think what was important about her and the other women characters in this book was to get their backstories. Do you know what I mean? To not make them just props in the action, but to really get to know them fully, their childhoods, their teenage years, how they got to be where they are.
And they are as much a product of this very unique environment with all of these tensions and all of these expectations as the men are, and where people have to kind of be thrust into these particular roles. When you first came up with this concept, and you're thinking, okay, maybe I feel like reading the classics, I'm home, we're spending more time at home, let me go down my classic reading list. Did this click for you right away that you were going to make this into a modern crime tale?
Right away. Now, mind you, it was 27 years ago.
So just overnight. You're like an overnight success as well, right?
Overnight
Of course. Yeah.
success, yeah, that Arctic night I referred to, overnight success at 55. No, a number of years ago, I realized how ignorant I really was about literature. And I got one of those great books lists, and I said, I'm going to read my way through it, which took 7 years. But early on, I was reading the Greek and Roman classics, and it just struck me. I know these stories. I know these stories from my youth. This was what was happening in the country, in the world of real crime. And so all those great themes of betrayal and loyalty or disloyalty, love and lust, power or subjugation, were all happening in American crime at that time. And so I related to it immediately. And I thought, yeah, at some point I'm going to sit down and write this as a contemporary crime novel.
Oh, fantastic. So at this point, when you're going to be launching this book tour, you know exactly where this is going. All three books are done.
They are now. Yeah, they are now. Listen, I never knew exactly where they were going. Do you know what I mean? I don't outline. I had an idea of where the main characters were going to head, but I didn't know how they were going to end up. I knew I was going to take them on a long journey across this country and over time. But that was it. I had the broad strokes. But yes, now all three books are done.
Wow. A publisher's dream. A
Let's
plus
hope.
plus.
Yeah.
I was looking over your bio, and people just know you. They know your name. They know your book. So I imagine it. People will go a long time without looking up, like, oh, where did he begin and where did he go to school and all of that stuff. But your biography reads like fiction. I mean, you have got to be one of the more interesting people around, having done so many things, lived so many places, and ultimately still pulling from time as a private investigator and working in law enforcement. What do you think was the experience for you singularly outside of writing that has most influenced your writing?
Probably my years as an investigator. I started off as a very low-level street guy in Times Square and Hell's Kitchen in New York back in the day, when it was rough, gritty, kind of soulful. I picked that up later in life after doing 5 years as a safari guide in Africa. I came back to investigative work in California, but on a higher level, mostly interviewing witnesses, getting people ready to go to trials, arson cases, homicide cases, insurance fraud, all kinds of things. But I think that the investigative techniques of that helped me in investigative techniques in writing books, and then I also think, well, you get to hang around a lot of cops and a lot of criminals and a lot of lawyers, and you begin to understand the lingo and the psychology and that kind of thing. So I think that was pretty informative.
It's incredible that also in the middle of that you say, well, and then I was, part of safaris in Africa. I mean, these are all just like one little moment or is somebody else's entire lifetime dream. Incredible.
Yeah, it was a great job. I hasten to add, they were photographic safaris. We were only shooting cameras, but it was a great gig. I loved it.
So when you get into the headspace of sitting down to write for a particular book, music plays a role in your writing. So what music goes into sitting down to write City on Fire?
Well, it takes place in 1986. And so 1986 music, but listen, a variety, I listened to a lot of Springsteen when I was writing this book because the town it's set in, I in fact have described as a Springsteen sort of town, one of those beach towns that was experiencing rough times. I listen to a lot of jazz always because I think jazz is the soundtrack of crime fiction, particularly noir. And then, there are Irish folk songs in this. There are Italian folk songs in this. And so at times I would be listening to that music. Sometimes just to be informed about specific lyrics or specific ideas, but other times just to set a mood for myself and put myself, in that time and in that place.
And are you habitual in the way that you write and the time that you write and the space that you write?
I am. It's terrible. I start work at 5:30 in the morning, like it's a factory, like the whistle blows.
Gotta get up there.
I'm there, and I work till about 10, and then my wife and I usually walk, 4 to 6 miles, come back and work until about 5 again.
Wow. Well, that sounds like a fantastic setup.
Well, listen, I'm very lucky, when I was trying to do this, and I was maybe 6 or 7 books rather into my published career before I could quit my day job, some of which you've alluded to. I was writing everywhere. Tents in Africa, China, hotel rooms, trains, planes, automobiles, you name it. So it's a luxury over the past, 20 some odd years to be able to say, okay, now I'm going to do it full time. Now I'm going to be at my desk at 5:30.
When you encounter people, do you feel that you meet them as a writer? I mean, is there somebody that you come across that there's something about him that inspires a character like Danny, who's going to be this, very complicated protagonist who generally has a good heart and wants to succeed. But I mean, are there little bits of people who in your life sprinkled throughout the character?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've known Danny all my life, right? I grew up with the Danny Ryans of the world. I grew up with a lot of the characters in this book. So I know them, knew them, and some of them are still around intimately, but it's funny because I think people that you meet just, socially, although I'm not a very social person, think that you're going to write about them. right? I think sometimes it's like, going to a dinner party and there's a therapist there, a psychiatrist. People think, oh, she's analyzing me.
Yep.
And, oh, I'm taking mental notes, and that rarely happens. But, sometimes I'm out and about and you hear snatches of dialogue. You see somebody, you think, well, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of quirky. I might use that. But the characters in City, I've just known all my life.
I'm so shallow that I often think I get nervous when I see a plastic surgeon. You meet somebody talking, and you're like, I can tell they're looking at my face right now and they have some ideas. It's just an immediate thing.
Right. Yeah, yeah. It's when you meet people in certain professions, you project.
We make
I just
biggest.
don't want to meet anyone from Men's Hair Club. Maybe extremely edgy.
You always want to be the after, never the before.
Exactly.
We're perfect as we are.
I'm always the before. It's sad.
I don't believe it. Let me ask you. You're over the course of the last couple of years, you've come to be a public figure in terms in an additional term, not just as a successful novelist, but as a voice in the political sphere, and producing a lot of videos that had incredible reach regarding the previous administration. What motivated you to step into this environment, and also did you have any reservations about it? Because fundamentally your career is right now selling books, so you have to,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine, every time you're putting something out that can be considered inflammatory to a big chunk of the country, is the publisher like, but Don, remember those books we're trying to sell?
I've not had any pushback from the publisher. They're completely supportive people and good people. Look, what happened was 2016. Now, we've been active before. I took out a full page ad in the Washington Post some years ago advocating an end to the war on drugs, another full page ad in the New York Times to advocate for prison reform and sentencing reform, issues that were related to books that I'd written. 2016 happened, just to put it succinctly. And I saw a person that I thought was totally unfit for this office, who was an insult to this nation, who was insulting people that I love in terms of insulting Mexican people and Mexican American people and calling them names, a person who was mocking a disabled reporter, a person who lied about the pandemic to the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives, a person who was racist and homophobic, a person who eventually tried to overthrow the duly elected government of the United States and launched a violent insurrection. Have I said enough? So my agent and friend and partner, Shane Salerno, and I decided, yeah, we're going to speak out. I'm not a big name, not an important person, but I have something of a platform at times. And we thought it was our responsibility in having that platform to speak out in plain and simple language, and sometimes tough, harsh language, about what we saw and to try to do something about it. Now, does it have an effect on book sales? Maybe. I don't know. I don't keep those numbers. I don't have those kind of demographics. I'm just a dumb writer. I tell the stories. But at a certain point, you have to think, and I felt that this was an existential moment in American democracy, that other things have to take a back seat. And if I lose readers, I lose readers. But it's more important, I think, to do what you can do to preserve our democracy. End of speech.
You've used your platform as well to help introduce some new writers, at least over here to us. And it was you that first brought TJ Newman from Arizona Native to our attention. And it was so fantastic. I mean, this book just blew up, and she could not have been a lovelier person. And her backstory of endless rejection while she was pitching this book and trying to get a literary agent. And then she ends up with you all. It's got to be so exciting to be kind of on the other end of that business.
Boy, it is. Listen, that's so much fun. TJ's not only a great writer, she's a great person, as you know, deserves all of this. I'm tremendously fond of her and respectful of her talent. And we were happy to play a role in that. It's very exciting. good for her,
Yeah, and it really is it's good for the rest of us to hear. I think anybody who is sitting on a dream that maybe they don't want to vocalize, or maybe they've already heard no's when they're trying to pursue X, Y, or Z, that somewhere on the back end there could be a yes. You just have
Yeah.
to have the fortitude to get there.
Yeah, I'm always telling aspiring writers, don't give up. Don't give up. My first book, I think 15 publishers rejected it before 16, including the publisher I'm with now. Hi, guys. Rejected it. And, 16th took it. But as I said, I think 6 or 7 published books into my career before I could be a full-time writer. And even down the road there, I remember I wrote a book called The Power of the Dog, not the current film, a completely different thing, and reviewed, beautifully all over the world. And I had $37 in my bank account.
Wow.
And it wasn't until a book called Cartel, and it was, again, my buddy Shane, who did the same thing with TJ and with Adrian McKinty and with other people, that turned it around financially. So, I'm always saying, don't give up, keep at it, keep at it. And the other thing that I say to aspiring writers is, if you do that, if you go and struggle with the empty page, or I guess it's the empty screen these days, and you do it in a serious way on a regular level, you are a writer. You're my colleague. You have our respect, and don't let anyone ever take that away from you.
As a writer, do you still have time and the space to be reading and to be enjoying new voices and enjoying new topics, especially in fiction?
Yeah, somewhat. Look, 90% of my reading is research reading, right? When I'm not reading, I'm hitting the books and, studying up and learning things. But yeah, I do get a chance. Well, TJ would be an example. Adrian had been around for a while and written some great books, never needed any of my help writing, But sure, I like to try to find new voices when I can. But the reality intrudes,
Yeah.
For the most part, I've got my nose into the work.
Well, Don, thank you so much for talking about City on Fire. Thank you for driving me out of my typical genres of books that I'm reading. And for once, my husband and he's read all of your books, and he actually grabbed this arc from me first so that he could read it really quick before it was even my turn. So it's always satisfying to be able to enjoy something a little bit different for me.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. Thank your husband for me. Say hello, and thanks for having me on.
All right, Don Winslow, appreciate it so much. The book is City on Fire, the first of a trilogy. So very excited to have Don Winslow, of course, who is just a very well-known writer. I mean, Tony has read, I think my husband has read every single book of his. And
was he jealous?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. But he did read this new book first before me. He took my arc right away.
He's like, that's my thing.
Yeah, I'll just get through this real quick. So the one cool thing, though, was that Don Winslow, or at least, his people maybe, put us in contact with TJ Newman. So they're all under the same umbrella company. And so, we really of course, enjoyed talking to TJ Newman about Falling and about the process of getting this book that was rejected over and over and over again into the hands of this company that got it seen by everybody, resulting in a fabulous bidding war for her debut novel and a big, thriller of the summer. And it's going to be a blockbuster movie and all of this. So anyways, I love the fact that he, also has a hand in that and really lifting up these new talents. And she's a hometown Arizona girl.
That's amazing. I didn't even realize that. But yeah, like that, and I can't wait to see that.
I know.
And just like think about like people, guys, like fighting over you for lots of money, like in your debut novel, like when you've taken all these risks, and to be supported by somebody of that stature, like
when you've received more than 40 something no's,
And then when your yes is the most, I mean, it's just like just a reminder whenever anybody is trying something, that just keep believing in yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're not, not at that point to reach that, but you just never know.
Yeah. You only need one big yes.
Exactly.
That's all you need. Clearly. That was a giant yes. It's like in big bold letters, like marquee style, flashing lights.
So like for all of those little like scribbled notes, we're not interested.
And I bet once all of those publishers saw that, they're like, we made a poor choice.
I made a poor choice.
I chose poorly for sure.
She's one of the authors, of course, that we've had on that we have just been so excited to see their success. And this summer, we're going to be able to enjoy quite a few of our former podcast guests' books put into paperback.
Yes, there's actually 3 just in the next couple of months that are going to be getting some good notoriety in the paperback world, which, as we've talked about, beach reads, you don't have to necessarily be romantic or in a beachscape.
Yeah.
It's anything that takes you out of it.
You can be mobile, boo. Yeah. Like we're on the go, right? Yeah. We're packing stuff.
But paperbacks, regardless of whatever genre they are, paperbacks make it the best travel companion.
Absolutely.
Right? 3 of them here. We've talked to Lisa Jewell, The Night She Disappeared, coming out. That's May 3rd. That'll be in paperback. So about now-ish, so very soon.
Yeah.
One of our favorites, Zakiya Dalila Harris,
so cool.
The Other Black Girl. That book is phenomenal. I know so many people that have read it since we talked to her several months ago and have just loved it.
Yeah.
So that might be one of my like beach read gifties when I put in like someone's tote bag.
Right.
I do a lot of recommendations for people who are going on vacation. Kylie Cruz, if you're listening.
We talked to her about the fact that there's also a playlist, and it is a solid playlist that goes with the book. It very much sets the tone of what the character's going through, and so I think that's it's another one of those that's kind of like, okay, page turner, but there's a lot of depth to it, and it'll give you a lot of food for thought.
Yeah, download that playlist when you're getting on the plane. Listen to it while you're reading the book. Have it in the background if you can do that. Some people can't. Some people like me like it. Just be fully immersed in it. She's got a fully immersive experience for you. And then Christine Pride and Joe Piazza, We Are Not Like Them, comes out in August. On August 2nd, I meant to say The Other Black Girl comes out June 7th in paperback. But one of our friends, Whitney Clark, just recently read We Are Not Like Them. And she loved it just as much as we did.
I love this book. And it's a book that I highly, highly recommend. And I think that it is one of those rare books that is just, total, like you're so, I don't want to say escape, but you're lost in it.
Yeah.
But it resonates in a really important way.
Very.
And it's part of a dialogue about race and criminal justice and social issues that are really important and painful and powerful. But it just also just takes you along in a story that you cannot step away from. And it's the ultimate in putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, which is what we always say is really the gift of reading, is that empathy of looking at the world through somebody else's eyes.
Yeah. And I think especially for them, it was really important that they weren't choosing sides. They were just kind of showcasing where different people are coming from and letting you see the scope of that. And I thought that was really beautiful, because you might see something in a perspective very new, but they also want to say, there's developments on both sides. No one's right, no one's wrong. There is a lot of wrongs, but no one's definitively right. No one's definitively wrong. We can all grow in our spaces, but here you have to know that other person's space to grow.
Yeah. It's a beautiful book, and I've recommended it to quite a few people, and everybody has loved it. And so I would hands down say it is definitely one. If you haven't read it yet, We Are Not Like Them. That's get it in paperback or listen to the audio, because that was beautifully presented as well.
Yes.
And you won't regret it. So any of these 3 are just And they were all like delightful people to talk to.
Oh yeah, all three of them. Well, four of them were fantastic.
Yeah.
And there's one for each month almost. You've got a little July.
They're taking you through summer.
You know, May, June, and August. You know, if you want to save Lisa Jewell for your July, that's fine.
You're welcome.
We
Okay.
got you covered.
Yes. And then the fun part about the podcast is like these things don't expire. So
Right.
you're into this book, or thinking about this author or whatever, then that conversation is available to you. So dig back into the library, our library as well,
Yeah.
when you're headed over to the real library.
And some of these they tease things that they're working on
Yes.
currently at that time, which actually authors churn through like their writing so quickly.
They're a whole jump ahead.
Oh my
So every time we're sitting down to talk to somebody about the book that they are promoting,
Yeah.
they have already turned in
Yep.
to the publisher their next one.
So
Most of these people.
as they're talking about what's next,
Yeah.
it's coming up very quickly. So you can write it down,
Uh-huh.
make sure it's on your TBR immediately.
Right.
Mhm.
No, I love it. There's just all we want is like lazy days and to catch up on all of this. But
Yeah.
these were great selections because I would highly recommend all of these. And I mean, you can't go wrong. Throw them in the tote in
Yes.
a pack. Go for a hike or a walk outside and go sit.
Find yourself a beverage. That's a great little day.
Just don't forget the sunscreen, Margaret.
How could I?
Okay. Yes, and glasses. And then if you're like need reading glasses, that becomes a whole thing. So you need the sun hat and then the reading glasses.
Definitely need a hat always.
The sexiest combo, but it's the combo that I have to go for.
It's the necessity.
Survival mode.
Yes.
This was a fabulous moment with Margaret. Margaret, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivia's.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.